Question here asking if a landlord can raise the rent by $200 without a rental agreement. Hi, my name is Rob Wells. I'm the Landlord Warrior on TikTok and YouTube. Please feel free to like, share, subscribe to our videos. We get this type of question a lot here. Can a landlord raise the rent by a certain dollar amount? In this case, it's $200, and this commenter says without a rental agreement. Okay, well, landlord's attorney or attorney's going to have to ask a couple of questions to figure out whether or not we can raise the rent $200 or not. Okay, this commenter says there's no rental agreement. Okay, one of the questions I would have is there no written rental agreement that just spells out, hey, the rent is $200, or there's no agreement whatsoever to pay rent? Okay, because if there was like no agreement to pay rent whatsoever, like such as we have what we call in legalese a tenancy at will, allow you to just stay in my home or property without provision of paying rent, that it's silent on that type of deal, then you're probably not going to be able to charge rent whatsoever. You may be able to give your tenant notice that, hey, start moving forward, starting on 30 days from now, that type of deal, you're gonna have to start paying rent or leave. That's a different story. You shouldn't deal with that unless you talk with landlord's counsel about starting something like that, okay, because you could have complications. What I think this commenter is saying is that they may not have a written rental agreement. Okay, at that point, again, if there was an agreement to pay rent, basically, generally under the civil code, it's presumed that an agreement's month to month, okay, unless there are other facts known about the agreement, such as, the parties are paying week by week or day by day, that type of deal, okay? So let's assume it's a month to month agreement, raising the rent $200. Well, we'd have to ask, okay, what was the original rent? Because the landlord might be able to do a change in terms of tenancy to increase the rent, okay, well, by written notice, okay? I'll give you an example, and you would have to know what the initial rent is or what the rent is currently, because that determines if it's lawful or not, and if you're subject to the Tenants Protection Act or not, okay? If there is no written agreement, I might, unless I had other facts here about the landlord giving, the written disclosure required under the Tenants Protection Act, if they're exempt or not, I'm going to have to assume that the tenancy does not have the proper Tenant Protection Act exemptions or disclosures in it, so it's going to be subject to the Tenants Protection Act if the tenants live there longer than a year. If it's subject to Tenants Protection Act, you're subject to rental increases are limited to 5% plus the change in CPI. So if in our case, for example, if our rent was, say, something like $4,000, okay, a $200 increase is 5%. Okay, so under the Tenants Protection Act, it is permissible because the amount of rent being changed is 5%. You get 5% plus the change in CPI. However, if your rent, for example, was $1,000, that $200 increase represents a 20% increase, basically. Okay, so that's not permissible. Okay, so it's all going to be relative to what the rent is and so forth. And I always tell landlords a lot, because sometimes people think that the answer is simple. It's not simple nowadays because of rules like the Tenants Protection Act and so forth. And you have to give proper notice, and there are other provisions in the civil code that may apply. So it's like a triage of questions that someone has to ask to get the proper answer here. So my folks that think that it's simple, be patient with your landlord's counsel. They're not trying to trick you or anything like that. Sometimes I get the feeling and impression that the people that we help, what they expect is I'm not answering their question directly, but people need this information basically to give you the right answer. So be patient, and that's why folks are asking those questions, because there are other rules that may apply or situations that may change the outcome. Okay, so landlords, if you're contemplating raising the rent or doing a change in terms of tenancy to add additional terms, or you have any questions about your obligations under the Tenants Protection Act or California law and you need help, and if you're in the Northern California area, feel free to reach out. We might be able to help out. You can go to our website and book a free case review. If you hit our profile link, you go to our website and there's a booking page for free case reviews, okay? A couple of questions will be asked to see if we're a good fit or not. But put your comments, questions down below. I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. Until next time, folks, I'll talk to you then. Thanks.